So in Battletech, Mech Warrior, we've got Gunnery skill, and admittedly, this is what I tend to focus on. I think this is what a lot of us focus on, especially loving big guns, but you need to be able to hit your target. And while there are many modifiers, Battletech is very much a game of moving modifiers. I'm trying to cut down on my modifiers, walking instead of running, paying attention to range, trying to get into close range or optimal weapons range, depending on what it is, trying to position my mech so my opponent does not get cover. Yet at the same time, your opponent is trying to move a number of hexes, use terrain, use cover, stay out of range when it's the shooting phase, optimally for you. Back and forth, this dance. But what about, and Gunnery skill is important because it's going to at least give you that base starting number, which you're going to stack on the modifiers. And of course, there are certain pieces of tech, targeting computers and other things, depending on the time period that you're playing and the target. But what about making pilot skills, pilot checks? When do these come into play? They don't tend to happen as often. Additionally, if you're playing with kind of the core rule set or the beginner's box rule set, Game of Armored Combat rule set, when you move into Total Warfare, that offers some more opportunities for pilot checks. But essentially, pilot checks are you trying to keep your mech upright and trying to allow your mech to interact with certain physical actions. And they work very much the same as Gunnery skill in that you have a base number representing the physical skill of your pilot, and it's modified up or down depending on what you want to do. So when do we encounter these? Sometimes, depending on the terrain and your movement, you might be forced to make a pilot check to stop, or a pilot check to move through something, or a pilot check to prevent from falling down. Then there's pilot checks to be made when taking physical damage or making certain physical attacks, but we see this with interaction. The two places for pilot checks, and this is where things get interesting, is when you've taken a certain amount of damage, depending on the scope of the rules you're playing. When you take a certain amount of damage in Battletech, this represents, yes, even if you have the armor, massive amounts of damage, kinetic energy slamming into you, you need to make a check not to fall over. And then once you're down on the ground, you need to make a pilot check to see if you can get up. And crazy things can happen even with an elite pilot. I mean, generally speaking, in wargaming systems, but even in Battletech, if you have to make a check on something, pilot skill, consciousness check, I don't want to roll those dice, even if I need like a 4 or higher, 3 or higher. I don't know. You never know. It's just better not to roll the dice. I was playing a game a while ago. I had an Atlas that was surrounded. It was there kind of as a linchpin to hold things while my other mechs were escaping with the loot. And I had full armor. I was in a good place. My opponents didn't want to get too close because I've got the autocannon 20. I'm dishing it out, and I figure, hey, I'm in an Atlas. We're doing Inner Sphere. This is the king of the battlefield. I took a couple of hits, fell down. Okay, not happy about that. I'm surrounded. I was like a battle master and maybe 2 or 3 other medium mechs. I mean, I was surrounded. Now I'm on the ground. I go to get up. Next round, I fail. I go to get up. Round after that, I fail. I go to get up. Round after that, I fail. Dice promptly and quickly get whipped across the gaming hall, and out comes a new set of dice, and I was able to finally make it up. You never know. I mean, what are the odds? Calculate the odds of that, crunch the numbers. But that's an example, 2 examples that when you take a certain amount of damage and you fall down, potentially, then you have to get back up. We see this with kicking. We also see pilot checks once your mech starts taking catastrophic internal damage. Now, most of the time, the legs get blown off, but there are times where the leg will take damage, and it could be lucky go to internal, and the actuators get hit, your foot gets hit, the hips get hit. It's going to slow movement. It's going to force you to potentially take pilot checks in certain situations. We could see this with certain gyro hits and other types of damage where you have to kind of be good at the controls. So it's something to keep in mind. It is, because you don't want to find yourself risking or being put in a situation where you have to make these type of checks when you're surrounded by other mechs, or you're navigated into a position where taking these checks will put you into a lot of trouble. And again, admittedly, myself, I think many of us, we tend to focus, if it's experience or a campaign system, we tend to focus on the gunnery skill, the shooting ability, as opposed to the pilot ability. But they are equal. On a side note, and I say that in keeping the scope of it, Battletech is also a role-playing game. And a lot of the mechs that I play with, and that I'm sure you play with, you have your favorite mechs. They have a history. They have a personality behind them. When we play a lot, we will have mechs with the same pilots, the same name, the name pilots for the game. And we're not even talking about playing in a campaign, just kind of the natural backstory. So a house rule, one of the nice little things we like to do is win or lose at the end of the game, based on the mechs that the pilots have survived. So if the pilot wasn't killed, each player nominates for their opponent an MVP. One mech warrior that, for whatever reason, they should get a skill point. They should get a VIP point. They should get some sort of accommodation. Could be because they fought well. Could be because they were smart enough to run away. Could be because they did death from above and something crazy happened. Doesn't matter what if. And when you get 5 of these points, you keep track on the mech sheet. When you get 5, you get to bump up the weapon skill, the gunnery skill, a little 40k crossover, or the pilot skill. Now, technically speaking, you do that, it changes the battle value of the mech, because it is going to increase it based on the mech warrior's skill. If it's not at that standard kind of generic mech warrior level, if you decrease them, then you kind of bring the battle value down. I mean, those calculations are in Total Warfare. Personally, we don't play with it. I don't play with it. Yes, you might field a mech that is a little higher battle value, but you know what? If you put in 20, 25 games with that mech and you've got a point or two extra, you've earned that battle honor. So there's a lot of ways, I should say, that when you're increasing this, or if you're playing in a campaign, the easiest thing is like, look, just jack up, shooting, jack it up. Don't forget those points. Don't forget those points in pilot skill. And if you've taken a consciousness check or two, that follows and stays with the mech warrior. Get a little medical attention for that. Maybe spend some experience to bring that consciousness check back down, because you do not want to go night. You don't want to get hit, go night, and in a recent game having a thunderbolt right there, ready to smash you if you take that consciousness check, fail the roll, and fall asleep. So looking at your game, the question that I will leave you guys with in the comments being the secret weapon. A lot of great Battletech ideas. Anytime you roll dice, there's the chance for bad stuff to happen. So I don't want to roll any dice other than in shooting. And I want you to roll lots of dice. So from the perspective of pilot skills, making pilot skills, do I dare say abusing pilot skills? What are some of the things that we can do in Battletech tactical-wise to force our opponent to make those pilot checks, knowing that sooner or later, no matter how legendary you roll or think you roll, you're going to fail it and you're going to fall down flat on your face. So how and what can we do to make that happen?